The audio from the tiny speaker on my phone was crystal clear, a snake of a voice slithering into my ear. It was my son, David. "We just need to be patient for a few more weeks," he was saying, his tone smooth and reasonable, the one he always used when he was about to get exactly what he wanted. "The doctor is on our side. He agrees her memory is slipping. Once we have power of attorney, we sign the house over to the trust, move her into the facility, and put the place on the market. It'll be clean." A different voice, my daughter Sarah's, chimed in, weaker but just as venomous. "Are you sure she won't fight it, David? She still seems so stubborn." I heard him chuckle, a low, condescending sound that I knew all too well. "Don't worry about her. This camera shows us everything. She can barely remember where she put her glasses. She won't remember her own name by the time we're done." They thought the camera they installed in my living room was their eye on a frail old woman. They didn't know it had become my ears, listening to their entire plan to steal my life from under me. They thought they were watching me decline, but I was watching them reveal their true, monstrous selves. Every whispered conversation, every greedy calculation was being recorded, not for their security, but for my liberation. They were building their case against my mind, while I was building a case against their souls. Their greatest mistake was underestimating the woman they had spent a lifetime taking for granted. They saw a fading mother, a convenient burden to be managed and disposed of. They didn't see the woman who had sacrificed everything for them, the woman who was now using their own weapon to orchestrate their downfall. Why would my own children plot to strip me of my home, my dignity, and my freedom? To understand how we got to this dark little moment, with me sitting in my bedroom listening to their conspiracy, you have to go back to the beginning. You have to understand the foundation of our family, which was built not on love, but on a system of sacrifice and reward, where I was always the sacrifice and my brother was always the reward. From the moment he was born, my brother Richard was the sun my parents orbited. He was the golden child, the brilliant boy who was destined for greatness. Every penny they saved went to his private tutors, his summer camps, his future university fund. When he scraped his knee, the world stopped. When he got an A on a test, there was a celebration. He was their masterpiece, their legacy. I was the afterthought, the quiet, responsible daughter who was simply expected to exist in his shadow. My role was to be practical, to be helpful, to not make waves. While Richard was practicing debate, I was learning to balance the household budget. While he was being groomed for success, I was being trained for service. The clearest example came when I was 18. I had earned a full scholarship to a state university 3 hours away. It was my one chance to escape, to build a life that was my own. I remember holding the acceptance letter in my hands, the paper feeling like a passport to a new world. When I showed my parents, my father barely looked up from his newspaper. "That's nice, dear," he said. "But who will help your mother with the house? Richard is starting college this year. All our focus needs to be on him." My mother just wrung her hands and talked about how lonely she would be. There was no discussion. It was simply assumed that my dreams were disposable, a small price to pay for the family's stability and Richard's unimpeded launch into the world. So I stayed. I went to a local community college at night, working during the day to help with the bills. I was the one who was there when the pipes burst, when my father's health started to fail, when my mother needed a shoulder to cry on. Richard would visit on holidays, gracing us with his presence, accepting praise and money before returning to his real life. Years turned into decades. I became the live-in nurse, the cook, the cleaner. In return for my silent sacrifice, my parents made a solemn promise. This house, the one I had poured my entire youth into maintaining, would be mine. It was the only inheritance I would get, they said. But it was my reward for a lifetime of loyalty. It was a promise I believed, because to not believe it would mean my entire life had been for nothing. When my parents finally passed, just 6 months apart, I was the one holding their hands. I was the one who arranged the funerals, sorted through their belongings, and paid the last of their bills. Richard flew in for the services, accepted condolences with a practiced sadness, and then asked to see the will. I wasn't worried. The promise had been repeated 100 times over the years. The house is yours, Eleanor. You've earned it. But when the lawyer read the document, the air was sucked from my lungs. The will had been amended just a year prior. The house was to be split equally between Richard and me. My brother, who hadn't spent more than a weekend under its roof in 30 years, was entitled to exactly half of my entire life's work. Richard feigned surprise, but I could see the glint of victory in his eyes. He must have worked on them during one of his rare visits, whispering poison into their aging ears about what was fair. He told me he couldn't possibly force me out, so he offered a generous compromise. I could continue living in the house, but we would be co-owners on the deed. I was exhausted, grieving, and had no money for a legal battle. I agreed. It felt like a defeat, but at least I could stay in my home. For years, things were quiet. I raised my own 2 children, David and Sarah, in that house. I tried to do things differently, to show them equal love, but I saw my parents' patterns emerge in David. He had that same easy charm as my brother Richard, that same assumption that the world owed him something. The real trouble started 5 years ago. Richard wanted to retire and decided it was time to cash out his investment. He wanted to sell the house. I was devastated. It was David, my own son, who stepped in as the hero. "Don't worry, Mom," he said, putting his arm around me. "I'll handle this." He proposed a solution. He would take out a loan and buy Richard's half of the property. He would become the new co-owner with me. He framed it as an act of love, of preserving my home. I cried with gratitude, thinking he was saving me. I see now he wasn't saving me. He was just buying a controlling share in my life. The deed was transferred, and my son's name was now next to mine. He had simply taken my brother's place, and the final, most devastating betrayal was about to begin. With my son, David's name on the deed, the atmosphere in my home began to change. His visits became less about family and more like inspections. He'd walk through the rooms, pointing out a scuff on the wall or a dripping faucet, not as a son offering to help, but as an investor calculating depreciation. He started calling more often, but the questions were pointed. "Did you take your medication, Mom? Are you sure you locked the back door? You forgot our lunch date last week. Are you feeling all right?" Sarah would echo his concerns on her own calls, her voice laced with a sweet, cloying worry that felt more suffocating than sincere. They were building a narrative, brick by brick, that I was becoming frail, forgetful, and incompetent. The campaign of concern escalated 6 months ago. It was my birthday, and they came over with a gift. It wasn't flowers or a book. It was a sleek white box containing a set of home security cameras. "We just worry about you here all by yourself," David said, his face a perfect mask of filial devotion. "This way, we can make sure you're safe. If you fall or need help, we'll know immediately." Sarah chimed in. "Think of it as a high-tech guardian angel, Mom." It felt cold and intrusive. I told them I didn't want to be spied on in my own home. My resistance was met with gentle, patronizing sighs. David said my reaction was exactly why they were worried. "See, you're getting agitated and paranoid," he said softly. "This will give us all peace of mind." They hired a team to install them the next week. One in the living room, one in the kitchen. They gave me a tablet and showed me how to view the video feeds, treating me like a toddler with a new toy. They controlled the master account, of course. What they didn't know, what they had long forgotten, was that my late husband, Robert, had been an IT network specialist. For 15 years, I had watched him set up systems far more complex than this. I had absorbed more than they could ever imagine. That evening, after they left, I sat down at my old desktop computer. It took me less than 20 minutes to find a back door in the flimsy software, granting myself full administrative access to the entire system, including the audio feeds they hadn't even bothered to mention. They thought they were putting me in a digital cage. Instead, they handed me a front row seat to their own undoing. For the first week, I let the system run. I'd listen in periodically, hearing only snippets of banal conversation. Sarah would call David, and through the living room camera's microphone, I'd hear his end of the chat. "Yeah, she's just watching her shows," he'd say. "Looks fine." It was almost reassuring. I started to wonder if I had grown paranoid after all, if my resentment over the house had colored my perception of them. Maybe they really were just worried. I let my guard down, tempted by the simple, comforting explanation that I was wrong about my own children. That fragile hope lasted exactly 8 days. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was in my bedroom reading when my phone buzzed with a notification that the living room camera had detected audio. I put on my headphones and listened. It was David speaking to Sarah on speakerphone. Her voice was tinny, but I could hear every word. "Did you talk to Mark at the real estate office?" Sarah asked. "He says the market in that neighborhood is peaking. We could get close to 700,000. My blood ran cold. David's voice was low, conspiratorial. "I know, but we can't move until the paperwork is solid. I spoke with Dr. Evans. I've been feeding him stories for weeks about her forgetting things, getting confused. He's ready to sign off on a cognitive assessment. He agrees that she's no longer capable of managing her own affairs." I felt like I couldn't breathe. The book slipped from my hands. This wasn't just about money. This was a systematic, calculated dismantling of my life, my identity. Sarah's next words twisted the knife. "And what about the Willows? Do they have a bed available?" The Willows, a sterile, beige-walled, assisted living facility on the edge of town that my mother had dreaded. David's reply was brisk, efficient. "They have a waiting list, but a dementia diagnosis gets her priority. Once we have power of attorney, it's simple. We sign her in, we sign the house over, we sell. In 6 months, this will all be behind us." There was no sadness in his voice, no conflict, just the cold, clean logic of a business transaction. The love I thought I had, the family I thought I built, it was all an illusion. The grief was overwhelming, but underneath it, something new and hard began to form. It was a cold, quiet rage. They had declared war on me, and I would not be the only casualty. The day after I heard their plan, the grief was gone, replaced by a chilling clarity. My tears had frozen into daggers. If my children wanted a helpless, senile mother, then that's exactly what I would give them. My new life as a performer began. Every move I made within the walls of my own home was for the camera, my audience of 2. I started small. I'd stand in the middle of the kitchen for a full minute, a vacant look on my face, before remembering I came in for a glass of water. I left the television remote in the refrigerator. During a phone call with David, I asked him 3 times how his job was going, each time as if it were a brand new question. I could almost hear his smug satisfaction through the phone. "Everything's fine, Mom. Don't you worry." Their confidence grew with each manufactured stumble. They became bolder, less cautious in their conversations. They started discussing lawyers and bank accounts openly over the phone, while in my living room, believing I was in the other room, lost in a fog of dementia. Every word they uttered, I saved. I backed up the audio files to a secure cloud drive and a separate hard drive I kept hidden in a hollowed-out book. Each recording was a brick in the wall I was building around them. But I knew I couldn't do this alone. I needed a professional, someone who could turn my evidence into a weapon. I thought of Margaret, an old friend from my book club days who had become a formidable family law attorney. I drove to the public library, a place I knew was free of prying eyes and ears, and called her from a payphone. I laid out the whole ugly story, from my brother's initial betrayal to my son's high-tech conspiracy. She was silent for a long time after I finished, and when she finally spoke, her voice was like ice. "The vultures," she said, "they always come for the house." Her advice was simple and brutal. Don't confront them. Don't give them any reason to suspect you know. Keep playing the part of the fading widow. You are their blind spot, Eleanor. Let them get comfortable. Let them walk right into the trap. We won't just stop them. We're going to dismantle them. When I hung up the phone, I felt a surge of power. The hunt had begun. My performance became more audacious. Guided by Margaret's strategy, my goal was to get them to reveal their greed in its purest form. The opportunity came during a scheduled phone call with my sister-in-law. Knowing David often checked the camera feed during his lunch break, I sat at the kitchen table and spoke loudly. "I completely forgot," I said, injecting a note of pleasant surprise into my voice. Robert bought some savings bonds for the kids' college funds that we never used. I found the certificates in his old desk. They must be worth at least $50,000 by now. I should probably cash them in. It was a complete fabrication. The only thing in Robert's old desk was dust and paper clips. That evening, I didn't have to wait long. The living room camera picked up David's excited voice on the phone with Sarah. "50 grand, Sarah, just sitting there. Can you believe it? This makes everything even more urgent. Once we have the power of attorney, we can liquidate that and put it into the trust with the house proceeds. We need to protect it for her, you understand." Sarah's reply was breathless. Of course. She'd just lose it or give it away. We'd be managing it for her own good. The casual, entitled way they laid claim to my imaginary money was nauseating. They were no better than common thieves, just dressed in the disguise of caring children. I saved the recording and labeled it Exhibit A, the savings bonds. The next phase was to document their medical manipulation. I knew they were poisoning my doctor against me, so I decided to help them. I called Sarah, feigning panic. "Sarah, I'm so scared," I whimpered. "Dr. Evans wants to see me next week, and I keep forgetting things. What if he says something is wrong with me?" I let my voice crack, a perfect imitation of a terrified old woman. Sarah soothed me with hollow platitudes, promising that she and David would be there for me no matter what. 10 minutes after we hung up, she called David. I was listening. "She's falling apart," Sarah said, a note of triumph in her voice. "She's terrified about the doctor's appointment. She's practically walking into the diagnosis herself." David laughed. "I told you. We push the right buttons, and she does all the work for us. This is perfect." They thought they were pushing my buttons. They had no idea they were just loading the gun that I was about to hand to my lawyer. The week leading up to my appointment with Dr. Evans was a masterclass in feigned helplessness. I let them see me burn toast. I lost my purse in my own house, prompting a frantic, staged search. My performance was so convincing that David and Sarah decided they didn't even need to wait for the doctor's official assessment. They were sure they had everything they needed. I was listening when David made the final call. "Forget the doctor's meeting next week," he told Sarah. "Our lawyer, Mr. Henderson, says Dr. Evans' preliminary letter is enough. I've scheduled a meeting at Henderson's office for this Friday at 10 a.m. He'll have the power of attorney forms and the property transfer documents ready. We'll get it all signed in one go. It's done." When David called me to inform me of the meeting, his voice was syrupy sweet. "Hey, Mom, just a heads up. I'm going to take you to a quick meeting on Friday. It's just some boring estate planning stuff Mr. Henderson needs you to sign to make things easier for you down the road." I played my part to perfection, letting a waver of confusion enter my voice. "Oh, David, all that legal talk just flies right over my head. But if you think it's what's best, dear, I trust you and Sarah completely." The silence on his end was filled with his satisfaction. He had won. He was sure of it. The day before the meeting, I moved with quiet purpose. I met Margaret at a coffee shop far from my neighborhood and handed her a USB drive. It contained a folder of perfectly edited, time-stamped audio files, each with a damning title: The Real Estate Plan, The Dementia Strategy, Exhibit A, The Savings Bonds, and Celebrating My Decline. Margaret simply nodded, her expression grim. "I'll have everything prepared," she said. That afternoon, right in the clear view of the living room camera, I began to pack a small suitcase. I folded a few sweaters, a set of toiletries, and the new book I'd been meaning to read. I wanted them to see it. I wanted them to think I was a docile old woman packing for the nursing home, resigned to my fate. They would interpret it as surrender. I knew it was the opposite. I was packing for the first day of my new life. On Friday morning, I dressed in my Sunday best, sat on the sofa, and waited. The camera's little red light glowed, my silent witness. The trap was set. David's hand was on my elbow, guiding me into the lawyer's office as if I were a piece of fragile china. Sarah was already there, sitting beside an empty chair, offering me a watery smile. The lawyer, a man named Henderson with a bland face and an expensive suit, gestured for me to sit. The mahogany desk between us was covered in a neat stack of papers. The air was thick with false sincerity. "Eleanor," Mr. Henderson began, his voice smooth as oil, "David and Sarah have expressed their deep concern for your well-being. We've put together a few documents here to simplify your affairs. This first one is a durable power of attorney." He slid a pen towards me. "If you'll just sign here." My hand hovered over the paper. David leaned in. His voice a low whisper. "It's for the best, Mom. Just sign." I looked from his face to Sarah's, seeing nothing but greed in their eyes. At that exact moment, there was a firm knock on the conference room door. A moment later, it opened, and my lawyer, Margaret, walked in. She carried a leather briefcase and moved with an unshakable confidence that immediately seized control of the room. David stood up abruptly. "Excuse me, who are you? This is a private meeting." "I'm Margaret Hale," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "I am counsel for Eleanor, and this meeting is now adjourned." She placed her briefcase on the table and opened it, but instead of papers, she took out a small, black audio player. "My client will not be signing anything," Margaret stated, her eyes locked on David and Sarah. "But she would like you to listen to something." She pressed a button. My son's voice filled the silent room, captured in perfect digital clarity. "The doctor is on our side. He agrees her memory is slipping. Once we have power of attorney, we sign the house over to the trust, move her into the facility, and put the place on the market. Margaret let the words hang in the air before playing the next clip, the one about the imaginary savings bonds, and then the next, where they celebrated how I was falling apart. The color drained from David's face, leaving a pasty gray mask of horror. Sarah began to sob silently, her hands covering her mouth. Mr. Henderson stared at them, his professional facade cracking as he realized he was sitting in the middle of a conspiracy to commit financial elder abuse. He slowly pulled the papers back to his side of the desk, his expression one of pure shock and disgust. I just sat there, silent, and watched their world collapse. I didn't need to say a word. Their own voices had convicted them,